This is James Goodall and Luke, my son, and Daniel, who's done a wonderful video of our shop tour. We thought we'd give you a little voiceover experience here and maybe make it a little interesting for you. Here I'm pulling out some Hawaiian koa. We've got some nice music of our awesome guitar players. So we've got to take the rough lumber and level it perfectly so that when we run it through our machines, everything comes out even thickness. We don't want to lose any wood. It's so precious. Special and rare Hawaiian koa. We also choose really nice matching sides to go with the backs, generally out of the same board. It's running through our new segmented cutter head there that doesn't chip out. Normally, a planer will chip the wood and ruin it, but that planer does a really good job. This is our big Hitachi resaw. They quit making those years ago, but this has been beefed up by our spruce supplier, Steve McMinn, up in Bellingham, Washington. He upgraded to a shake bandsaw that cuts like shakes for roofing materials and sold us that years ago. That grizzly white belt sander, I specified how we wanted that to be made for sanding thin pieces of wood and short pieces of wood. And Shiraz up at Shiraz Bolalia is a friend of mine that owns Grizzly Industrial. He had that custom made for us and kept it as one of his models.
Hi, I'm Luke Goodall, and as you can see here, I'm working on book matching this back and side set of really gorgeous Hawaiian koa. I'm looking for the best mirror that I can get out of these sets. And I'm doing the same for this Italian spruce top that we're using on this guitar. This is a process called candling. It actually uses a high-power bulb behind the spruce in order to see imperfections in the wood, only possible on certain species of spruces.
Sometimes there's hidden resin pockets and bark pockets, things like that, that we want to know ahead of time.
I'm working on processing these sides and backs in order to get the proper book match. I'm aligning the grain to achieve just the most premium book match that I can get out of this set of wood.
Yeah, that hump on there is for the cutaway, and you'll end up cutting off one of the humps on the side that doesn't have the actual cutaway. And you're thinning that area a little extra because it's extremely tight bend.
So I've wet my sides down and I'm setting a timer so that I can evaluate when I should preheat my side benders in order to achieve the proper heat. I've got the temperature just right for this species of wood, and as I slide it in, I actually use a couple of divider pieces in order to apply the heat only where I want it. And right now that's going to be the waist.
Yeah, it's really easy to overheat areas. A lot of people experience trouble bending sides, especially real curly woods like maple or koa, but we don't have very much loss. Once in a while, but it's pretty rare. Luke has a real tight regimen on that.
As I move through, I'm evaluating the temperature of my heating blankets. They tend to vary as I move my clamping cauls into place. Here I'm using our jigs that allow me to wedge the perfectly book-matched back and tops together. I'm applying glue in order to join the back together. That gives me a nice wide surface to build our guitar out of.
That glue joint has to be just absolutely flawless. So the tool we use to put that edge is called a joiner, and it has to be really sharp blades and perfectly tuned in order to give just a flawless edge that's perfectly true. So when you put the two pieces together, there's no stress or gaps or anything like that.
Here I'm locating my center line in order to draw out my pattern. Some sets of wood are difficult to locate the center line on if they're really quarter sawn and the grain is really even. A lot of spruces can be like that. I'm always happy when that happens. It means I've got a really good tight joint. There are very few species that are wide enough to provide a surface for our guitar, top and back, which is why we join and book match them together. Once joined together, these tops and backs are actually as strong or stronger than the bare wood itself.
That's right.
So now I'm going to cut out the pattern that I've drawn on this Italian spruce top. And the same with the back.
Right here you'll see there's two little spots where the pieces of wood aren't quite wide enough. That wood is so special and incredible that we added like little 1/4-inch ears to the wide bout on the back. And by the time we're done, they're almost completely trimmed off anyway.
Yeah, we're talking about maybe 1/64th to 1/32nd of an inch. It's very minor. So I've drilled an index pin hole and I'm marking out the area where I'm going to do the rosette inlay. I use cyanoacrylate to seal the area off and spread it out in order to really get a hard surface. It helps when I'm routing the rosette slot. I've mounted and clamped down my back and I'm routing the slot for the back strip. We've got an ebony back strip with a ebony maple purfling on the outside of it. Now that I've got the back strip fit just perfect, I'm using a little bit more cyanoacrylate in order to install it into the back itself. Now I'm routing the rosette slot. This guitar is going to have a Powa shell rosette.
That router bit needs to be absolutely new, razor sharp, otherwise it'll fuzz and chip.
My dad's converted an old drill press into a fly cutter in order to cut a very, very slim channel that we're going to fill with a piece of really thin stained pear wood called an eccentric ring. Here I am installing that eccentric ring. It actually gives a really nice accent to the inlaid shell. We use an ebony maple laminate, and what I'm going to do is get them inserted into the rosette slot and wedge them in nice and tight. And then I'm going to use this custom designed radius sander.
That was kind of an inspired little tool I made that has two different radiuses of sound holes, and so the rosettes are a little different diameter, and so we made that little aluminum sanding jig.
So I'm looking for a really nice snug fit on this Powa shell here. These are back reinforcement strips that we make out of mahogany. They're the beginning of the structural integrity of the back bracing. I'm doing this bracing on a bench called a go-bar deck. It allows me to apply pressure with these dowels exactly where I want to. You can see the glue squeeze out evenly on all sides there. I've elevated these tops in order to allow airflow to pass on all sides because we are really serious about humidity control within our build environment.
Our shop sits around 45%, and then we have a special large room where we leave the wood for at least 2 weeks prior to building to cure and settle down to around 34% relative humidity and at a temperature of about 80 degrees.
Yeah, we're looking for a good median point on our humidity in order for the wood to be able to expand or contract properly as it travels to various places around the world.
We've heard that from a lot of our dealers that our guitars are at least as durable and sturdy and impervious to damage from low humidity and stuff, but there are limitations, but you have to choose a point of low humidity to build in, otherwise you're in trouble when you send guitars to dry areas. I'm actually building in this room because it's humidity controlled. Here I'm installing the braces onto the backs, and I'm looking to achieve the maximum strength of bond on our go-bar decks. The braces are already in a 15-foot radius, and so I need a jig that allows me to brace them to match. We've got sides that I've removed from the bender, and I'm removing the retainer clamps. I use this belt sander to begin cleaning up the sides
It needs some processing because the steam and heat from the side benders tend to change the sides a little bit. I'm fitting and measuring and marking out the length of these sides in our jigs. I've prepared these sides and the neck and tail block in order to join together just perfectly. Applying glue, clamping them together. This part here that I'm installing is our mahogany kerf liner. It actually gives us a wider surface on our sides in order to properly mount the top and the back. I use specially reinforced clothespins in order to install the kerf liner. I'm cleaning up the inside of the sides and getting them ready for mounting the side braces. I need a really nice flat, clean surface in order to provide structural rigidity.
Right, we tend to bend our sides and use sides that are a bit thicker than most. I feel like it gives a firm foundation to the top and back resonating without damping any of that perimeter vibration. Plus it makes a more stable instrument.
Here I am trimming the length of the braces to the perimeter of the top and the back. Our experience with various species of woods and our knowledge of our various model sizes allows us to properly shape these braces.
Right. The different size instruments, the different species of wood make a lot of difference as far as how thick the pieces will be, but it also depends on the individual pieces. Sometimes you might have a stiffer, denser top. You can work that a little thinner. And some people like that and others may not, because you get a little more powerful sound and a more brilliant sound, and yet you might not have quite as much warmth in a stiff top.
Using a chisel to dimension these braces according to the species and model size. Now I'm installing the sides into their corresponding molds and using clamping cauls and expansion cauls to hold them into the mold. This allows me to go to my radius jigs, my 15-foot and 50-foot radius sanding jigs, which allows me to get the proper radius on my top and back. Now I'm trimming the laminate extension block back. And cutting the slots for where the braces from the top and the back intersect the sides. Back
to that 15 and 50-foot radius, a lot of people put a deeper radius on tops, I don't think that's a good idea because it's putting more stress into the top, which will raise the frequency. We like to have an instrument that has, especially on the steel strings, a warm, full, powerful bass without losing definition for sure and balance. It's really an art to get a steel string that has a good bass. And we really are known for having small instruments that have great bass as well. That's very difficult and important.
Every top and back is custom fit to the sides of the instrument. So I've got the instrument now sandwiched together, fully assembled as a box in this really ingenious jig that my dad made so that we can do it all at once. I'm actually able to remove all of the clamping calls right through the sound hole because of the way they're designed. As soon as I've removed the guitar from the jig, I'm immediately going to go into voicing the instrument by tapping on the top. It gives me an initial picture of what this species sounds like now that we have an enclosed cavity. I'm pre-routing the slots for the bindings, which go on the edge of our instrument. The purpose is to protect the instrument and add beauty. Here I'm drawing on the top in order to help myself target the specific areas that I want to remove material. I'm voicing the top on this long belt sander. I'm doing this targeted sanding in order to reach the peak tonal profile of the instrument because each set sounds different, which is why I tap and I sand and I adjust as I go. I'm preparing the neck mount area now. Now that I've finished shaping the top and preparing the neck mount area, I'm able to do my final binding slot on this router here. And then I can route the top purfling slot. I bend the bindings and the purflings to match the shape of the sides in the side benders as well. I use another router to route the slots for the binding on our peg head, which is also bound just like the body. This is what we'd call our signature series peg head style. As I'm making my purfling slots on the top and on the back, I'm actually actively fitting the piece into place to make sure that I've got just a perfectly snug fit. This jig allows me to route my end graft slot. And once I've got my slot, I can install the ebony end graft. All of these really small purfling pieces, all these fine details, they all come together to make a cohesive instrument that is beautiful and well protected at the edges. I have these very useful jigs that my dad's designed that allow me to bind the guitars in halves. It takes me many hours of fine mitering detail work with chisels and sandpaper and a variety of other tools to install the binding and these very, very slim purflings, which are about 10/1000ths of an inch per layer, about 32 thousandths overall. We don't do this just for you, the player, but also for ourselves, really, because we're looking for a certain kind of excellence. Whether or not a person notices it, we do it as though we were building it for ourselves.
Yeah, we really care about the tonal quality as the primary philosophy of our building. Yeah, it's nice to have great looking inlays and fancy inlays, but we err usually on the simple, elegant side of beauty instead of overdoing things. Some folks that might want a museum guitar, collectors and whatnot, that don't play even really much, might not be as impressed, but that's okay. We just care about making the best sounding instrument possible. All the instruments of the orchestra, you know, they're not overly ornate. There's a certain simplicity of beauty, so that's our philosophy of building. We use great materials, incredible woods, and extremely precise joinery and precision through the whole process. And of course, the action has to be fantastic as well.
And speaking of action, here I am working on the fretboard where the player spends most of their time. I'm installing the fretboard bindings. These are ebony. I select all of the inlays so that they'll reflect up at the player. It's really just a detail that I would like to have on my own guitar, and that's why we do it.
Yeah, even one side of the shell sometimes will have more chatoyance than the other side, so yeah, I want to pick pieces of the shell that has the nicest look.
Binding the peg head takes just as much work as the body. At this point, I am mounting the neck to the body after having cleaned up all the binding, and I'm doing a neck pre-fit for the angle forward and back, side to side, in relation to the bridge, in relation to the top, and adjusting the height of the heel in order to mount the heel cap.
Also, Luke gets that angle nice so that when I get the guitar later and fit the neck, there's not a lot of adjustment necessary. That radius sander works really nice, but the paper does wear out fairly quickly. We have to keep that paper fresh.
Having finished the fretboard, I'm now able to mount it to that neck that I've done the pre-fit on.
You can't believe how much that fretboard will slip around even with indexing pins. So Luke is very careful to keep it from sliding off one way or another.
There are probably about 100 fine details in here that are hard to spot, but they all matter.
This is a process. I don't know if I ever worked myself out of my job and retired. This is hard to teach how to sand the neck. It's very, very easy to get lumps and dips and that kind of thing. It's like shaping a surfboard,
Yeah, sure.
which I did in high school.
That's one of the reasons that I'm glad that my dad is still doing these. I'm sure you, the player, will notice if you pick up one of our guitars. Feel the neck, you'll see.
Those wide angle shots are cool. Oh, we didn't actually film the staining process on some of the necks, the rosewood bodies. We'll do a stain and we have to clean up the side dots and the purfling on the peg head. Sometimes fretboard binding, purfling, or fretboard binding will be a contrasting color, and that'll need to be sealed ahead of time before we stain. Joe is awesome. We have a man who lives near us. We could be in a huge city and not have somebody as good as him. He is a good friend, he's humble, he's teachable, and he's smart. And he knows a variety of finishes. He actually travels internationally to learn special Japanese finishes and things, and he's amazing. Easy to work with. So we give our instruments to him. I thought we were going to put up our booth and do our own spraying, but he's got all the legal paint booth and all the permits and everything, and he only lives about a mile away from us. We deliver once a week 2 guitars. We do 2 instruments a week. When we were in Hawaii, we had 15 employees and made 2 instruments a day. These have gone through the finish process in our curing, so that's probably about a 5-week delay. So the finish can cure properly and doesn't shrink after I sand and buff it. I go through scraping the finish down so that I get a really level surface, and then I go through like 5 different grits of sandpaper. It's very time consuming. I go down to 2,000 grit. It's easy to sand through that finish as well because it's very thin. It might look like a tabletop or like a piece of glass, but we really put on a thin finish, and our finish is unbelievable. I think we have the best finish on any guitar. It's just incredibly durable. When we switched to this finish from lacquer, it solved about 10 different problems that we were having. Everything from finish checking to imprinting under your arm, which lacquer gets gummy. And the minute you spray a lacquer guitar, it starts to degrade. It's like amber. Amber feels hard, but if you were to drop it, it would shatter. That's how lacquer is. It doesn't cross-link. It can crack with temperature changes and humidity changes and stuff. Anyway, we had some guitars go to Germany that had some finish checking on brand new guitars because they took them up and froze them in an airplane. And so that was it. We switched over to this catalyzed urethane, and it's not a UV finish, and it's difficult to apply, and it's very difficult to buff. As I'm buffing here, it just It really is hard stuff, and yet it's very thin. And when we switched to it, our instruments, I noticed, sounded like they were maybe a year old compared to lacquer. They were more mature and rich and had more character. It's really a great finish. You can't apply too much pressure and go too slow because it'll apply too much heat. Although this finish can take it, still you have to keep moving. And now I'm fitting the neck to the body. After I buff, I go over and take the tape off the fretboard and clean up the edges there. Fitting the neck, that neck angle is extremely important. We have to plan ahead for the stress of the strings in order to get that neck angle just right. We've got some little simple jigs that we use to keep that angle just perfect. And if it's not quite perfect, we have to adjust that heel angle so that the neck shoots at the body at just the right angle. All our fretboards are bound so that you have a nice clean look on the ends without seeing the fret tangs.
You should tell them about the fret material.
Evo Gold, it's a German-made wire that actually wears almost as well as stainless steel. Some sort of a white bronze, very tough stuff. It's what they make ships' propellers and bearing shafts on ships out of, I believe.
Yeah, great durability.
Yeah, really resistant to wear. Pretty hard to work with, but it's not as hard as stainless steel, and some people say stainless steel doesn't sound as good. We put in a nut with a bevel. I was just cleaning out the bevel and it's kind of wedged in there. I guess there's not much footage of that, but anyway, it's really a precise fit to that nut to hold it with very little glue. Now I'm going through the process of gluing the neck and the bridge on, and I have a special router set up. It just barely sands through that finish. I'm talking almost perfect, so there's no digging out of the wood. And then I relieve the edge of the bridge right here so that when it sets onto the top with the glue and everything, there's no thickness of glue left.
Perfect bond.
Yeah, it's just a very, very tight bond. Some people say, oh, You've got to use hide glue. Honestly, that stuff is inferior to what we're using. This industrial glue called Tight Bond is extremely strong, stronger than the wood itself. And it's almost brittle. It's not a rubbery, soft finish, so that it's transmitting tone incredibly well.
Not only that, but it enables simple repairs too.
Yes, that's true. Our necks are fit where they're glued just over where the fretboard extends onto the body, and they're fairly easy to remove and reset a neck angle if it's ever necessary. This is the next day after the neck and bridge have been glued on. That's kind of a cool shot. Good job, Daniel. Gotta be careful removing those clamps. You don't want to dent anything. Fitting the bridge pins. I use this stop so that all those pinholes are the same depth. I relieve the low E and the A a little bit so that the strings don't bind in the pin. And then I go through and pick out of a whole bunch of bridge pins just to get 6 that are fit perfect, even though those bridge pins are cut with a CNC lathe.
Which is why we recommend on our frequently asked questions page on our website that you keep your pins in order when you change your strings.
So we're putting a pickup in Daniel's guitar here. That's some really beautiful woods that he has on that instrument, that Italian spruce top and the amazing Hawaiian koa.
Tell them why you switched over to the K&K.
Oh, well, yes, we really love this K&K pickup system. They have a few different choices, but even the one with no internal battery, they really sound great and very accurate to the tone of the guitar, and lots of acoustic folks are really loving it. It's a good system. One of the main reasons I like it is it doesn't need an under saddle pickup, which I don't like because our saddles are fit so perfectly. Anything under that saddle diminishes the tone of the guitar acoustically, and so that's, in my mind, really a bad thing.
When did you first decide to do clear pick guards?
From the very beginning, yeah. Actually, our instruments, most of them are, well, I don't know, half of them at least are our own design. When I started building back in 1972, I wasn't trying to just make another Martin guitar, so I sort of have my own design. Some people say it's kind of a California stylized, you know, surfer. Anyway. And then later, in the late 90s, we decided to do a traditional series that has a little bit more of the look that Martin folks might like.
Right, like herringbone, chevron marquetry inlays and rosette.
Boy, is that some pretty wood there. There's a picture of that nut that's wedged in. I wedge it in from the bass side. And those saddles are fit very precise, so you can almost not actually get it out. The saddle is not glued in, because it needs to be removed from time to time to adjust the action. I put them in so you can almost not even get it out with your fingers, because I want to transmit the tone as best as possible to the top. Using dividers to get the string layout. I made these simple little jigs that hold these fret files so that they stop filing when they seat down over the first, second, and third fret. Using a little jig to get the action height. I have to do a special compensation on the top of the saddle so that the intonation of all the strings are correct. The bass strings need to be a little longer in order to intonate out properly. We use a truss rod that has a little arc in it. It's not just a straight bottom rod. So it works very well, very efficient. And tightening the truss rod nut doesn't over-tighten the rod in the neck. It just takes a tiny bit of adjustment. Here I am photographing the guitar at the end. We actually provide a thumb drive with high-res photos of our instruments.
Yeah, it's difficult to photograph something so glossy and reflective.
Indeed. Oops, there's some dust on that peg head.
I really like those Goodall 510s.
Those are the best machines I know.
Yeah, they're really nice. And there's the matching gold end pin for the K&K.
That ebony binding looks real sweet on that koa. All our instruments have that incredibly three-dimensional Goodall guitar sound. We have a wide array of choices, over 35 different special woods from around the world, rare and precious, many different body sizes, unique instruments, everything from our baritone to our parlor to meet everyone's needs. We'll look forward to building you a world-class instrument.